Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about passive and active voice a little bit more and talk about situations where you definitely shouldn't use passive voice or where passive voice can be problematic and situations where you can use passive voice. Okay, so let's talk about passive voice in situations like news reporting and things like that, where sometimes passive voice is called the coward's cop out. Okay, and I want to take a look at some example sentences. So, first one, uh, the child is being abused. The decision has already been made. We were badly burnt by the sun. The storeroom was left unlocked. The vase will be fixed with glue before it is seen. Mistakes were made. The village has been pacified. The library is being liberated as we speak, and 50 employees will be given news of their future next week. Okay, now these sentences are, there's no one really performing actions in them. Some of them are very unclear and they're very misleading. So let's talk about what these sentences might read like if they were more honest and in active voice. That mother is abusing her child. The CEO has already decided that. We burned ourselves in the sun. I left the storeroom unlocked. I'll fix the vase before mom sees it. The president and his chief of staff committed crimes. We bombed the village. We are burning books and breaking windows in the library. We will fire 50 employees next week. Okay, so a lot of times you'll see in political speeches, in news reporting, in trials, in all these kind of situations, even something as simple as, I asked you what happened, and you're like, oh, I don't know, somehow that desk got knocked over and that Chromebook was broken. Okay, situations like that where people use the passive voice, they're usually trying to sort of hide who the actual actor is, who the actual subject that is performing the actions is. So I want to look at a recent example from a news article, and this is about a government employee that had been appointed for a high-ranking position that had security clearance, and he had had domestic abuse like accusations in the past. And so this is from an interview with him. He has privately told others, this is about his argument with his wife. He has privately told others that they were arguing over a vase and she was somehow hit with the vase. Notice that use of passive voice. She was somehow hit with the vase. This is him trying to explain how his wife got a black eye. That's some serious passive voicing there to cover something up, right? Doesn't say who hit her with the vase. The vase just magically leaped up and hit her, okay? So those are situations where people use passive voice and where we really want to avoid using passive voice because it tends to hide the actual doer of the action. Okay, now why is this important? How does this actually affect people? So this slide that you have a little copy of here, a little picture of, is actually from a slideshow to journalism students about why passive voice can be such a problem. So passive voice erases the perpetrator. A 1995 study found that after reading sexual assault stories written in the passive voice, readers showed increased acceptance of rape and battering of women compared to stories written in the active voice. So, same study found a 2-to-1 ratio of passive to active voice in published sexual assault stories in the Boston Globe. And a 2009 study found journalists use the passive voice less in domestic violence cases where the woman was the perpetrator against a man. So this is just some real-world applications of why, sometimes these grammatical things we talk about are important. They really do affect how people think and how people view others when we're talking about passive versus active voice. Now, all of that said, we talked about how active voice makes our writing more interesting and clear, and how active voice avoids this coward's cop-out, these situations that we're talking about where it erases the doer. Okay. However, there are times when it is appropriate to use passive voice, and I want to talk about those. So first one, if we don't know who is performing the action. So if I say something like, my purse was stolen, and I don't know who stole the purse, okay, then we can use passive voice. Okay. Now you could make this active, right? I could say something like a thief stole my purse. But it's also a place where it's okay to use passive because you really don't know who the person performing it is. Okay, when the noun performing the action is not important. So that can be when I'm trying to put emphasis not on the actual like doer of the action, but on like the object of that action. So for example, the test was administered. It doesn't really matter which teacher, say we're talking about like the ERBs or SATs or something, it doesn't matter which teacher was in the room when that test was being taken. The important thing that we're emphasizing is the test itself. It's more important than the person that actually proctored that test. All right, and then when it's obvious who performed the action, so say I'm talking about you know, a meeting between a boss and an employee, a really serious meeting, and I say she was fired. She could only have been fired by her boss in that context. And so we don't need to repeat that. So these are situations where you don't have to use passive voice, but where it's more acceptable to use passive voice and where it doesn't make your writing less clear. Okay? All right.